Welcome to the Art Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Dr. Tatyana Mamut, who's the CEO of Wayfound AI. Hi, Dr. Tatyana. I'm just going to say Tatyana moving forward, if
Of
that's
course,
okay. I mean,
of
you
course.
earned your doctor, so we have to say doctor. But
It's
I want to
it's true.
pretend we're friends, even though I've never met you before till now, and that should be cool.
Maybe we were friends in a past life. You never
Uh,
know.
it could be. I mean, yes, you do. It's true. You never know. All right, Tatiana, give everybody the 2 minute, just 2 minute spiel on what you're doing today.
So Wayfound is a AI agent management platform, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Wayfound. You may have heard, or your listeners may have heard, that 2025 is going to be the year of AI agents. And when we get into my story, you might say, what is an anthropologist doing starting a company about AI agents? Do have some background in technology. We can talk about that too. But the big sort of highlight there and the headline is that what's going to be happening is a massive shift in the culture of our companies and in the culture of our society writ large. And my co-founder, who's the technical co-founder, has a degree in philosophy. I have a degree in economics and anthropology. We both worked on big tech products together in the past, and we came together and said, we really need to start a company that's an AI, Gen AI company that will help all of us to go forward into this future with optimism and adapt in the best way possible so that we can adopt AI agents, work with AI agents, get all the value out of AI agents, but still not lose our humanity and our soul, right? And keep moving forward as human beings, working together in cooperative environments as Gen AI comes on the scene. So that is Wayfound. We help companies find all the savings and all the return on investment with AI agents through a pretty transformative and very innovative monitoring platform. And we also make sure that humans can have insight and collaborate with AI agents in the best way possible.
I am, I'm really excited for this conversation. I love when people who don't have computer science backgrounds do these types of things. I think it always leads to better products and better sort of everything because you don't have some baggage, say, but sometimes degrees sort of bring, especially in the computer science side. So, what's really interesting too, and this is going to be a story about you, and I'm going to maintain a timeline, but dumb little things pop in my head all the time. So I got to sort of interject. I finished my computer science degree in 1991, State University of New York up in Potsdam. My favorite liberal arts class was the anthropology sort of like 101 class. That class I went to just about I think I only missed I never had a full week of class, but I never missed that class. That class I really enjoyed.
It's really fascinating to understand what's common about the human experience and how the things that you thought were perfectly natural are actually not universal. It's really eye-opening, isn't it? Now, can I say one thing also about the computer science thing? I kind of have, I do have engineering in my bones. And so computer science is kind of like a natural thing that I had. So let me just give you a little bit more background. My mother's an engineer. My father's an engineer. My grandmother's an engineer. One of the top engineers in the Soviet Union actually was my grandmother. My aunt's an engineer. My brother is a software engineer. So, I don't have an engineering degree on my CV, but I know a lot about engineering because when I was growing up, it was all engineering. Like everything my
And we're going
parents
to talk
talked
about that.
about was engineering. So,
And
yeah.
and we're going to talk about that now because it's in your blood, and that's kind of like where I almost want to start. I like starting kind of back there. Where did you grow up and go to like grade school?
I was born in Kharkiv, Ukraine, which has seen better days than the last couple of years. Um, and we were Soviet Jews, and my family had a long history of persecution under Stalin, both sides of the family. My great grandfather was arrested for being a communist by Stalin, and my grandfather was arrested for being a Jew who was seemed to be too successful under Stalin and sent to essentially a work camp, a gulag. And so when the United States opened up their borders to Soviet Jewish refugees, my family came over in 1978. I was 4 years old. And I still remember that plane ride on Pan Am from Italy to the United States. And I grew up in outside of basically in New York City and Queens, and then outside of New York City in very Soviet Jewish communities. So I don't really feel American. I worked in Russia for a while as well, in Moscow, leading brand planning.
Don't jump too far there
Okay.
because I want to stay here. But you moved. So at 4 years old, you moved to the States in '78.
Hmm.
Where did you end up moving again? I'm sorry.
Queens to
In
Queens.
Queens. Okay, I'm from the island of Long, so I
Okay, there you
all
go.
right. So
Same
Queens.
place, basically.
So that would mean that you graduated high school around I don't know 85,
No,
80,
I graduated high school in 92.
92. Okay,
Yeah.
you would have okay. I tried to do the math real quick in my head, but I guess I
Yeah,
didn't
no,
do it
it's
well.
fine.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, but New York was a very different place, right, in the 1970s and 80s than it is
I mean,
now.
I grew up there. I graduated high school in '87, so like we're
Yeah,
basically the same sort
same
of.
generation, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We're experiencing all the
Hmm.
same things at the same
Right,
time.
right.
I'm just a couple of years older.
Exactly. I mean, we were refugees, right? So we lived in a studio apartment with, no money, public support, until my parents learned English. They worked in a laundromat for the first, few years that we were in the United States. I slept on a chair. Apparently, this is the story I was told. We lived in a studio apartment, the whole family. And we
Wow.
didn't have space for a bed, so I had to sleep in a recliner chair that we got out of the trash, somebody's trash. So yeah, so that's my family background.
Wow. Did you enjoy? You said you don't feel American, even though don't remember much of. You can't remember much of Ukraine at all, even
No, I
from
don't
before
remember
that.
much. I have like little bits of memories, but no, I don't remember much. My family, does speak Russian. I grew up speaking Russian. But I don't feel American. I grew up in a um, very immigrant community. In the beginning in Queens, it was a very, Soviet Jewish immigrant community. But then even when we moved to New Jersey, pretty much all of my friends were immigrants. Now, a lot of them were Soviet, also Soviet Jews. Some of them were, Vietnamese refugees. There was a big Vietnamese refugee community because that was around the same time too, right? Mid 1970s. And Filipino folks and people from all over the world. So I grew up in these very immigrant um, neighborhoods and communities and environments, and a lot of things about American culture just never seemed natural to me, and it's one of the reasons I feel like in the United States I can only live in New York or San Francisco because the vast majority of people in both of those cities are immigrants, and there's such a openness to immigrant mindsets. It's just very different, I think, for me to live in a different place. I just feel
What
very
high
comfortable
school?
with
What high
immigrants.
school did you attend? Was that in Queens or
But that was already in New Jersey,
in
Farallon High
Jersey?
School.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And even at high school, you didn't feel like the mix of people there were, say, American as opposed to. Um,
We were all in, I mean, I would say 80% of my friends were immigrants.
wow.
So
Yeah.
again, not all from the former Soviet Union, but I would say half of them were from the former Soviet Union. But my boyfriend was from Vietnam. One of my good friends was from the Philippines. I had another friend from Pakistan, a very good friend from Pakistan. A few friends from India. Like it was just a very immigrant focused
Yeah.
community. Yeah.
That's super interesting. What things were you interested in high school? What would Tatiana be doing like between
So
ninth and 12th grade?
um, I was called the drama queen when I was little. I was the kid who always got amazingly good grades, but I was always in detention, like after school. And it was hilarious because the teachers just didn't know what to do with me because I couldn't stop talking and I couldn't stop like acting up. But it was never in like a disruptive to the class way. It was just like I was breaking the rules. So they had to give me detention. Um, and I could never stop doing things. I was in drama. Whenever I do anything, I do it like 100%. So, when I joined drama club, I had to like be the president of drama club, right? And so I did every single play in the drama program all through high school. Very large roles, and then I had to be the president. And then I joined the newspaper my sophomore year, and then it was very clear that I had to be the editor in chief. And,
Yeah.
and
Is it I have to be in control, or I just have to sort of reach that sort of level? Like, what do you think it is?
it's interesting because it was I think it was partly me and my intensity and my passion of throwing myself into it. But when I think about what actually put me in those roles, it was the teacher who was sponsoring those activities who said you have to be the editor in chief, and I was like, oh, what does that mean? And she was like, here's what you do. And I said, okay. And it was the same thing with drama club, right? The drama teacher said to me, you have to take drama all 4 years of high school. And because you're obviously really passionate about it, and you're going to be the president of the drama club, which meant, by the way, that I couldn't take physics in my senior
Mm.
year because I had to take journalism and drama, which conflicted, like, which messed up my schedule and conflicted with physics. So I had to take a required PE class, physical ed, like gym class, during the time that physics was happening. And so, again, what I would do is I would just like walk out of, gym class or health class and just go to physics class. Because I was like, I'm not allowed to do this, but I'm really unhappy about the situation that I have to take gym instead of physics. So I'm just going to walk out of class. And I would literally just walk out of class and go to the physics class and then sit in a chair with my boyfriend at the time because he was in the physics class. And the teachers just didn't know what to do about it. So I don't know what it was about me, but I was always just super intense. And somehow people understood my intensity, especially the teachers. And they either like pointed me into a direction of like, now you have to do this, or you show up my class and you're not even registered. Okay. Like, cool, do
Yeah,
whatever you
you're an
want.
anomaly at that point.
Yeah,
So,
but it's like it's so weird now looking back about like how did I get away with that, you know?
well, how did your parents let you get away with it? Because one, it's the '70s, early '80s, and parents aren't like they are today. I mean, you talk back and you're gonna get slapped. So,
My parents
right?
were like working all the time. They were absent. They were in
Oh,
Manhattan. They were working. My father worked like 80 to 100-hour weeks. My
wow.
mother had a full-time job in Manhattan. I mean, they were both engineers at this point. And no, they were
Did they
working.
get engineering jobs eventually after
Yes,
they
yes.
came?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, eventually, yes. I mean, their talent for engineering overcame their lack of English.
Mm.
So, at the end of the day, as they started to actually, talk to people and or actually start to like do jobs, they immediately. I mean, my father started in a very low level job at a production studio, which then the one of the lead sort of executives at the production studio left and started R. Greenberg Associates, which turned into RGA, right? Richard and Robert Greenberg. And they were like, we're taking Eugene, we're taking my dad with us. And then they gave him, again, he still to this day, he barely speaks English, but he could like not communicate with anybody back then.
Wow.
But they saw that he was super talented and they just kept giving him more and more challenges. And then he got an Academy Award for the studio at the end of the day. So yeah, like my at that point, my parents were, had good jobs in Manhattan, but they were totally absent. They were fabulous parents. I wouldn't have had it any other way. But yeah, they just weren't around.
But they must have known you were getting detention and you were, or they just didn't have time. It's just like, Tatiana,
My,
deal with this. Leave me alone.
my grades were really good, so that's all they cared about.
Okay, that's fair. What kind of engineering did your mom do? What kind of work
She's
did
a
she?
mechanical engineer. My father's
Okay.
an electrical engineer, but he actually started doing computer animation in the early 1970s in Ukraine. So
Wow.
he did some of the very first computer animations in the world. So and then
Wow.
my grandmother was the head engineer of large Soviet factories, like throughout the 1950s and the 1960s and then the 1970s. And she actually like completely innovated and revolutionized fiberglass manufacturing in the Soviet Union. So it's a like I come from a very long line of
Do
amazingly talented
do
engineers.
you did you ever even I guess even from the time you could be conscious of all of the accomplishments of your ancestors here, do you ever feel pressure that you had to sort of be equals or even do more than what they're doing? Did you ever feel that pressure?
No, it was not. I mean, my parents are my father's perspective on work was work should never feel like work. It should feel like play. So he believed as long as you were playing, you would be fine. My mother was really more focused on do you have a stable job, which I certainly do not have like stable jobs in my life, although, they're not unstable, but um, the way that I pursue my jobs is not the most stability enhancing. It's not what I'm optimizing for. Um, and so yeah, I think I just really inherit both my father and my mother's mother, the engineer, she's the most successful engineer actually in my whole family lineage. And so, she and my father had the same perspective. Like, as long as you're pursuing your intellectual passion and really enjoying yourself, everything's going to be just fine. And if you're not enjoying yourself and if it feels like work, that's
That's a
not a good place.
smell. That's a smell, and you should be looking.
Right.
That's really interesting. So when you're about to graduate from high school, what's going on? What are your next plans? Is it? I mean, at that time, at least even at my age, like college was the de facto thing you did. There wasn't any other option. So I'm wondering if that was the same for you. Like it was going to be college, and that was it.
Well, that's true. Um, Now, remember, I'm an immigrant from like a long line of engineers. So my three-year career choices in my parents' heads were doctor, lawyer, engineer. Like that was
But
it.
you weren't doing any engineering in high school. You were doing drama and
Oh,
journalism.
well, okay. So I was the drama queen. I should say that the thing I've always loved, the subject, like intellectual subject, academic subject I loved the most was social sciences, so history and then economics. So I took economics my senior year and in high school, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
What about economics did you love?
I
The
loved
micro, the macro,
modeling
the
humans.
modeling.
Modeling humans. I don't like modeling atoms or chemicals or even biological systems, but I love modeling human behaviors.
Okay. How do you get to do that in economics?
Well, economics is all about modeling human behavior, right? It's all about the economy is a society of humans, and you're trying to create a model that explains and predicts what kind of economic transactions will take
Okay.
place in this particular society, and then what the economic outcomes will be, right? So I loved economics. And my parents knew nothing about economics because, they grew up in the Soviet Union. So it was like Marxist economics. So, and so again, they were like doctor, lawyer, engineer. You should go to, Rutgers, like a state school. For some reason, they were like, oh, it's inexpensive and it's good and there's good, you know, you can get into medical school if or law school or whatever. And and I was like, none of those sound good to me. And I really like, I really like economics. So I convinced my parents that because economics entailed a lot of math, it would be okay. Like I was
Okay.
like, look, I'm just going to take a lot of calculus in college. And they were like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's mathy, so you'll probably be able to do something with the math." But and then I decided to go to a liberal arts college. And that was like, what is liberal arts? That sounds like you're never going to get a job.
So
So
what
I
school did you go to?
Amherst College,
Hammer. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Fine.
and
Yeah.
uh, and so I went to
So their education never had, I guess their education never had liberal art anything.
well,
It
no,
was all
they
hedged in.
read a lot of literature, Russian literature, right?
Sure.
Russians are very big on, and Ukrainians are very big on literature. But they're, in terms of their college, it was really an engineering, right? Math,
Gotcha.
engineering, right? Chemistry, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So they had no idea. Like they were like, "Oh, well, as long as she's doing a lot of math, it's probably okay." I blew through literally like almost all the math classes and all of the econ classes within my first, 3 years of college. And because again, remember, like when I do things, I do them super intensely. So I ran out of courses in my junior year of college, so much so that my advisor had to create two new courses for me just
But
so that
how
I
many
could do them.
credits were you taking a semester? You were taking 20 credits?
So Amherst doesn't
18?
really do like the normal credit system, but I was
Mm,
taking, a math class usually and well, I also, because I took economics in high school, I actually tested out of the first year of the econ classes.
nice.
Right? So I already started a year ahead. And then I would like double up on some economics classes just because they were offered at the same semester and they seemed really interesting to me. So I doubled up sometimes and they ran out of courses.
That's
And then
smart.
my advisor created a law and economics class for my junior year, and then he had me be his research assistant to write a new microeconomics textbook with game theory in it, which was a new discipline in the early 1990s, or was actually being remade in the early 1990s. So that was really fascinating. So I got to do that. And then my senior year, I had I had no courses to take. I would have had to go to University of Massachusetts, like down the street, and take graduate level courses if I wanted to take any more econ courses. Like that, those are my options. I was like, they were like, well, you should take linear algebra at UMass and then take a graduate econ course at UMass. And I was like, I don't want to go to UMass. So then, so that's when I started taking anthropology courses because I'm like, there are no more economics courses for me to take.
Yeah, you finished your major in terms of classes, but you needed n number of hours left, right?
Right.
So you started
So,
taking it.
so it was sort of like my fun year because again, I was already done. Oh, they did actually have me teach economics then, my senior year. So the econ department was like, well, why don't you do something at least in the economics department your senior year? So why don't you teach economics? So I got to be the first undergraduate teaching assistant at Amherst for intro to economics.
How did
And
you enjoy that? Did you enjoy teaching?
I did. I really did enjoy teaching. It was weird teaching people my same age and my friends, actually.
Yeah.
That was a little weird, but it was really great because I was the teaching assistant, and I would, do office hours and, smaller seminars around the things that the professor lectured about, and then I graded, helped grade, some of the, you know, homework assignments and sometimes some of the exams. But again, that was weird because I was grading my
Yeah.
friends' work in the
But
same
did
class.
you have any social time taking these many classes and getting things done?
No, because I also worked 20 hours a week. So I worked in the mailroom, I worked in the admissions office, I worked in the registrar's office. I worked a lot. Okay, so my family, right, didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then my father actually lost his job my freshman year of college. So I was kind of on my own for to pay for college, and Amherst was very generous with a nice grant. But then I had to come up with half of the tuition by myself. So I worked like 3 jobs, maxed out my hours in the mailroom. One other, I could never go to parties because I had to be in the mailroom at 6:30 in the morning sorting mail almost every day.
Did you feel at all by the end of that 4 years burnt out at any level? So talk about the anthropology. So that last year you kind of doubled down on anthropology.
Well, no. So here was my strategy. I'm like, I've got the whole year to myself. What do I want to do? I took drama courses. I took creative writing and ballet courses at Smith College. I studied with a Zen Buddhist monk in Northampton. I did an independent study with a Zen Buddhist monk who had a Zendo. And then I took 3 anthropology courses. So that was my senior year. It was like my gap year, my fun year, my
The Buddhist
sabbatical.
stuff, is that like learning meditation or something?
Yes. So I sat in a Zendo, he's Japanese and he didn't speak any English, but he was one of these people that like when he walks into a room, like light fills the room. Have you ever met one of these people?
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
I get chills just thinking about him. Isho Fujita is his name. I think he's pretty young. He's like only maybe 20 years older than me. And he is just like, again, I met him and I was like, wow, I want whatever he's doing, I want that. And so I would go to a Zendo and we would do walking meditation and we would do sitting meditation. And, he, gave me books to read. Like we didn't talk that much about the books. He doesn't really speak English, but the books were amazing. The most amazing one he gave me was Opening the Hand of Thought, Approach to Zen. And it just
You still
transformed.
remember any of that? You still practice any of that?
I don't do Zen meditation, but I do a lot of spiritual practice. A lot of
Gotcha.
spiritual practice.
So, but you do end up with, or like a minor in the anthropology when it's all said and done.
Um, I didn't want to do I didn't want to formalize it. So one of my things was I and I would highly recommend this to other kids. Don't do a double major. Just do like whatever you require. Do your major. And don't do a minor because there's no upside to it, right? You're not going to get like anything extra, like nobody cares, right? Um, but what it does, it sort of like limits you in terms of what you can pursue, and your ability to pursue your passions, especially when you're young, is more valuable than another certification or whatever you're going to do. So, no, I didn't do a minor. I just took these courses and I loved them. And whatever started to like light me up is whatever I decided to pursue. So I met Isho Fujita, right? Like this Zen Buddhist monk. And I had this time and I'm like, he lit me up. So I'm just going to go find a way to like hang out with him, like an hour every week and
Wow,
get
that's cool.
credit for it. Um, and so just no, so I didn't minor. I just really lit me up. And especially this professor, Deborah Gewirtz, she lit me up. And I just wanted to spend as much time doing the things that were lighting me up and making me happy.
So now, what happens when you're going to graduate from Amherst now. You got your 4 years.
So in the summertime in college, remember I had to earn money, right? Like I that was like a big thing in my life is paying for college. So I interned on Wall Street, like all through college. And I interned in investment management, which again, the econ background was very helpful for that, and also with the Council on Economic Priorities in Manhattan. Um, and so I entered college with the desire to become an investment banker. Okay, so
Okay.
and then I actually worked on Wall Street and in investment management, and I loved the work. I really found the work very interesting, but the culture was just not for me. Like I am a very frugal, very like I don't really like nice things. I don't want to like have a house in the Hamptons. I don't like fancy food. I don't like any of those things. I don't like to drink a lot at night. I never partied through college, so that was never like a thing for me. So I just didn't like the culture. I didn't meet any friends really. I didn't feel close to the people I was working with. I looked at them and I said, I would never want to grow up and be any of these people.
I'm
So
the same way. I go to Paris to go to Harry's New York bar to have hot dogs. Like like I'm the same way. I live modestly, and I don't need the fancy cars and houses, and
I
it
don't like nice. I just
doesn't
and
turn me on.
I don't like it. Like I actually don't like it. I don't like the pretentiousness of it. It feels kind of gross to me, Like I don't get
Necessary,
it.
really.
Yeah.
I don't
I
need to
don't
show
actually get
off.
it.
When people
I don't
ask me
get
what I do, I just say I work for sanitation, or like complete opposite, like some dirty, like outside of my hands.
Well, what's funny is whenever somebody asks my husband what he does, he's like, I point, I click, I type a little bit. That's
I tell the kids sometimes I sell coconuts down in Miami Beach. That's what I do. I sell
there you
coconuts. I
go.
sold a lot of coconuts today.
That's right. That's exactly right. So anyway, I went back, but it was great money, right? So like even though after my second summer I knew it was not for me, the money was fantastic, so I just did it again and again and again.
It was
um,
a means to an end at that
it
point.
was a means to an end. Like in
Yeah,
college I had to do it because I
yeah.
had this big bill that was coming up right every year, so I had to make and they paid great. um, and so, my senior year of college, you know, I was like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be an investment banker. And so, of course, I'm like, well, I should probably be a management consultant. So that's the other option, right? Like if you're not an investment banker, you're a management consultant. And then those interviews were hilarious, especially my McKinsey interview, because they were like, well, we're going to teach you how to think. And I'm like, I'm not going to need that. I already know how to think. And then they invited me back for the second, like for the actually the third interview. And I was like, guys, did you not get it? Like I don't want my brain molded into like
Yeah.
whatever the hell you're doing.
I don't need you to rewire my brain. My brain is
That
fine.
yeah, and they were like
Yeah.
selling it like, oh, we're gonna teach you how to think, and we're gonna rewire your brain, and your third interview is like on site, and it's this intensive thing, and we're gonna like learn how you think, and we're gonna actually help you think better. And I was like, oh my God, this is like joining a cult. I do not want to be part of
My
this.
goodness. So they offered you a job anyway.
Well, they didn't offer they
Oh,
offered me an interview and I declined.
gotcha.
But so then there's this advertising agency that came on campus, and they showed some like fabulous ads, and the people were really nice, and I was like, that looks like fun. So I joined this advertising agency out of college called Leo Burnett, and they offered me literally one half of what the consulting firms offered me.
sure.
Like the consulting firms, I think were around $47,000, and Leo Burnett was $26,000
And
for
this
my
is
first job. 6.
1996 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a lot of money for 1996.
Not a lot of money. All right.
No.
Um, and so, but I was like, you know what? This seems like fun. I don't have to pay for college. Why not? And so I moved to Chicago
Wow.
and started working in global advertising. And they
Luckily, you don't really like to go out, so
don't like to
you
go
didn't
out.
need much of an entertainment budget. But that had to eat up a lot of rent in Chicago, right?
So I remember, like, I'm super cheap. So I found two roommates, and we rented literally a mice-infested apartment, but like right on the lake though, like 1 block from the lake. Really, like on West Waveland and Broadway. For anybody who knows
Okay.
Chicago, the rent was very very cheap. Like it was, I think, like $300 per person. I think it was like a $900 apartment. 2 bedrooms. We turned the dining room into a bedroom. It was infested with mice, which again, we should have like figured out why it was so cheap. But
Yeah.
what did we know? We were 22 years
So
old.
basically, you'd just be walking, and the mice would go by your feet, and there was no way to manage that.
No, no, no. We would wake up and there would be like little mouse prints like on our cereal and like all over the shelves. No, the mice came out at night when there was nobody around, but like the mouse poop was like all over
Yeah.
the shelves
Yeah.
and all over the kitchen. That's how we knew.
Wow.
And then
No.
after a while, we started to hear like, can you hear that? Like in the walls,
Yeah.
like the mice like scratching in the walls. It
Wow.
got pretty bad actually. So we did all move out after 2 years. Um,
Still, you did 2 years there. I mean,
we did 2 years there. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive. But
So,
it is what it
so
is at that point, I guess. Yeah.
well, again, it was a great neighborhood, really easy to get to work, right by the lake. So I used to ride my bike 35 miles every morning, or on the lake shore. So I mean, a few mice in your cereal, whatever.
So how long did you stay at that job?
I was at well, so my first stint at Leo Burnett was 3 years, and then my
Well, that's a
second
long
stint at
time.
Leo Burnett was another year in Moscow to do my dissertation research and to help them launch a bunch of new brands into the Eastern European market, especially
So
in Russia.
so at that point you're working on your PhD while you're there?
Yes. So the second time
Okay.
I was working on my PhD. So what happened was I was working in advertising, and still was a staunch believer in neoclassical economics. One of the things that I did do, the Council on Economic Priorities job that I mentioned, one of my summer jobs, was doing economic research on the Russian economic transition. So this was 1994, 1993, 1994. And what happened was the Soviet Union collapsed, and there were all of these military, right, things happening, right? There were like military bases and all these military factories and nuclear weapons all over the place. And so I was doing research on how the transition from military uses to civilian uses was going and how this was going to lead to economic growth in Russia. So I'm working in global advertising. It's 1998. And everything that we had modeled about how well the Russian economy would be doing through the 1990s completely is wrong, because in 1998, the Russian economy collapses, just like completely collapses. And you remember this probably, right, Bill? And it was outside of the realm of anything that we predicted in economics. Now, in most disciplines, you would think if it was a mathematically based discipline and you said all of our predictions and all of our calculations ended up to be completely incorrect, wouldn't you like want to like figure out why?
Yeah,
In
what
economics,
didn't happen? Yeah.
well, right. So like imagine that like the greatest astronomers in the world predicted that an asteroid would show up, on this date, right? And it never showed up. And they had no idea why. Like, wouldn't you be like, well, maybe you should like rethink how you're doing these calculations? But in economics, that didn't happen. They just doubled down. They were like, there is nothing wrong with economics.
Oh, wow.
And so the more I dug into it, the more I realized that economic predictions are absolutely incorrect. Like there is something fundamentally wrong in the discipline of economics because the predictions, you hear economic predictions by economic experts all the time. What percentage are right, or like what percentage are right? It's basically random, right? Like the the distribution of accuracy of economic predictions is essentially random, which means that there is no accuracy in economic predictions. So I had, again, remember, I loved doing all this stuff and modeling human behavior. So I had kind of a crisis because, you know, everything I had done was wrong. But then I thought, wait, what about this anthropology thing, though? It explains human behavior in a different way than economics. But so maybe economics should be more like anthropology or should use some of the explanatory methodologies of anthropology and supplement economics. So I decided to go to grad school to do this. So
Nice.
because I started to think about all these things, and Leo Burnett wanted to send me to Russia as well. At the time, I didn't want to go to Russia, but I thought, I would go to Russia to do this research. So I knew I had like an invitation to go to Russia and work with them very closely to basically be on the front lines of the Russian economic transition to try to use anthropology to explain all the things that economics got wrong. Okay, so that was
What did your parents think about you going back to Russia and living?
they were like they were super negative about it. My mother said, "We took you out of that place. Why would you ever want to go back?" She literally said those words. "We took you out of that place. Why would you ever go back?" Um, my father adamantly would not visit me there. He did go back to Ukraine once, but not never to Russia. My mother did come and visit me once, but she hated it because it had changed so much. Anyway, when we left, we had to give up all our papers. Like we are like political, like we are true political refugees. Like we had no papers when we left the Soviet Union. We were stateless refugees. I do not have two passports, right? My perspective is if you have two passports, you're not a refugee. Like you're an immigrant, but you're not a refugee because true refugees absolutely can't go back to their homeland. And so it was just a huge shift to even think that you could go back because when we left, that was it. We were never going back ever. Nobody in the family. And the fact that I went back to live there,
Well, you lived there as an expat, technically, right?
that's right. I did live
Yeah,
there as an expat, but it was still super weird because I have a
I
Russian name and I speak fluent Russian.
yeah. But now I'm just curious. Did people think you had an accent beyond just say Ukrainian or?
Yes, my accent in Russian is Ukrainian mixed with um, American, but it's more American now. After I lived in Moscow for a year, at the end of that year, I lost a lot of the American accent, but I still sounded
Oh,
very Ukrainian. Like Ukrainian has a lot of softer sounds than Russian, so I still have that. But now, if I were to speak Russian, it's like full on American accent.
yeah.
So,
People would know that you're
oh,
American. Yeah, yeah,
definitely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I I don't. My wife is from Colombia, so I only know about these accents because she can hear somebody speak Spanish. She'll tell you what country they're from almost immediate. It's not about what you look. It's I don't know how they look, but moment they open their mouth, she can tell you. Like
Exactly.
and
There's
and
like
in
certain, yeah, there's certain
yeah,
sounds, right, in the
yeah.
language.
I don't hear it. I mean, I can tell a difference between some countries now because of her.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would imagine people would know almost immediately that you weren't native. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
interesting.
That's right. So, So I forgot where I was, but so I was like fascinated with like, okay, let's figure out what actually went wrong with economic prediction by doing a more anthropological approach. So my first plan was to go to econ grad school, right? Get a, a master's or a PhD in economics. And so this is 1998, like this is 1999, right after the Russian economic collapse. So I'm applying to grad school in 1999, and like no econ departments understand at all what I'm talking about. Again, remember, all the economists in 1999 were just doubling down. They were like, we weren't wrong. And I'm
Yeah, I
like,
mean,
well,
you're
of
trying
course
to
you were wrong.
disrupt. Yeah.
Of course you were wrong. Here was the prediction, and here was actually what happened. Yes, you were wrong. And I'm going to like figure out how we get it right. And they were like, we weren't wrong. And I'm like, so then I decided to go to anthropology. Like I decided to shift and get a PhD in anthropology instead.
Who would be much more open to introducing economic ideas as opposed to economics introducing. But that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
you were trying to be disruptive, really. I mean, from an economic schooling perspective,
no, I
right?
was just trying to be right.
From their perspective, you were coming in being disruptive. I don't
But
want my name on that.
but if what you're saying is there's a discipline where in order to make your theory match reality, you have to be disruptive, what does that tell you about the discipline?
Yeah. Well, yeah, people protect they're protecting it. No, I hear you. I'm not shocked that you couldn't get an econ department to go along with it.
Right. But I did find, so I went to, so I applied to a bunch of anthropology programs, and I chose the one in my normal sort of way that I make choices. I chose the one that gave me the least money and that was the least prestigious. So Harvard gave me a free ride, Princeton gave me a free ride, University of Chicago gave me their top fellowship across the entire, university, the Century Fellowship. UC Berkeley gave me 1 year of funding. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to go to UC Berkeley.
But why? I mean, they're all great schools.
Yeah, well, my family, of course, and my family's on the East Coast, so they all were like so mad that I didn't go to Princeton or Harvard, right? Like
But
Harvard really
Princeton's in
rolled
your
out the way.
backyard. Yeah, Princeton's in the
Right, Princeton's in the
backyard.
backyard. They gave me 5 years of funding. Harvard gave me unlimited funding, plus summer funding, plus anything else that I wanted. And
That's
I
wild.
was just like,
Do
I
you know
wasn't
why?
feeling it.
Okay, but why? Like now that you can look back on it, honestly, why? Just because it was going to be a harder challenge having to pay for this?
No. So if you want the real reason why,
Yes, I do. I want to know. As a parent, I want to know why you made that choice.
because my soul was calling me to the Bay Area.
Wow.
So I believe that every human is born on planet Earth for a destiny, and our soul is here to fulfill some purpose. And I needed to be in the Bay Area in order for me to fulfill my purpose. And the reason, this is what I truly believe. I believe that the reason I, in part, got those amazing offers at, Harvard and Princeton was to test my resolution to whether I was going to follow my heart or my head, whether my soul was going to lead or whether the rational sort of social norms that we have around us are going to lead me toward my next step. And I am so grateful that I followed my soul and I followed my heart. The first time I went to the top of Bancroft, like near the International House, and I looked out onto the bay, and I honestly, I felt in my whole body that I am meant to be here.
You had like
And
some inner peace. Like, yeah.
yeah, like an inner calling. It was like an inner
Yeah.
calling. It was like my heart said, I have to be in Berkeley. And my head said, you are crazy.
And somebody at Harvard said, How did she turn that down?
No, so here's what happened. If you want to know what happened. So
Yeah,
the
yeah, this is good. This is good
University of
stuff.
Chicago gave me their top university fellowship, the Century Fellowship. Okay, it hadn't been given to an anthropologist in years, right? They usually only give it to like economists and like hard scientists and things like that. And I when I wrote to the person who would have been my advisor, she wrote me back and she said, do you not understand what you're doing to our department? This is the first, like, this is the reason I know this is the first time in years. This is the first time in years that anthropology has been given a Century Fellowship. You have to come. And I said, no, I'm going to Berkeley. And then she wrote back and she said, you could teach at Berkeley after you finish at Chicago. And I was like, okay, clearly. So she was like, what are you doing? Because at the time, actually, Chicago was the top anthropology program in the world, was at Chicago. So that was,
They really loved this idea that you had.
they
Everybody
really
believed
did.
in it.
Also, because I had credibility and I already had a sponsor in Russia where I could do my field work. So I had it all like lined up before I started. And at Harvard, I couldn't even write the email to decline it. Like every time I started to write the email to decline, my head would rebel. Like my brain was like, you cannot do this. Like you have to go to Harvard. Like again, my advisor at Harvard, he is such a wonderful person. He writes such incredible books. He came down to New Jersey to have dinner with me, to convince me to come to Harvard. And like I mean, everything about Harvard, like, and their offer and everything was like amazing on paper.
I almost feel like talking to you. It's like the devil was trying to keep you out of Berkeley by giving you all of these offers and making it almost impossible for you to say no, right? And you somehow still told the devil to flipped him the bird and said, "I'm going to California, whether you like it or not."
It was absolutely. I've made a couple of completely irrational decisions in my life, and I believe each one of those was a test. And with each one of those, I went with my heart. Now, in retrospect, which one, how many did I actually not pass? And I went with my head. That I don't know, but I made enough where I am just exceptionally happy because I have followed my heart instead of my rational brain or what society expected me to do.
Was
So,
Berkeley surprised you said yes when they must have had some idea of the other offers that you'd gotten?
yes, they were they were, but like the department is so large and like the whole university is kind of dysfunctional. I mean, it's like UC Berkeley, right? It's like it's berserkly. And I mean, it really is. And so, and and then the other thing is like I wasn't Marxist. Like half of the faculty hated me because I wasn't very Marxist, and I had this like not very like anti-capitalism bent in my dissertation, like in my dissertation
Wow.
research, and so they didn't want to fund me very much, and so but again, this like the universe is amazing. So because I didn't have funding, I had to find my own funding, right? When I got to Berkeley. Because I had 1 year of funding and then I was on my own. If I'd gone to Harvard, I would have had 5 years of funding plus summer funding plus anything else I wanted. So I'm like, okay, so I have to find funding somewhere else. The university isn't going to give me funding. So then I'm like, okay, fellowships. I'm going to go apply to fellowships. So I applied for a Soros fellowship for New Americans, and I applied for a National Science Foundation fellowship. And these are like really, really, really hard to get, like super, very hard to get. And I got both.
Wow. Wow. This idea you had, and wow, you were like right on top of something, right? Like,
And
yeah.
because I got both, not only did the irrational decision end up fulfilling my heart, but I was actually much financially, I was ended up being much better off than if I had taken the Harvard.
Yeah, you were freer actually.
And I
You
was
weren't
totally
beholden.
free.
You weren't
I was
beholden.
totally free. I didn't have to listen to what the department
Yeah.
said. I didn't have to listen to what my
Right.
advisor wanted. I had my own funding. I could do
Well, you
whatever.
did need them to give you the you did need them to approve the final work at the end of the day, though.
Yes.
Okay.
But I mean,
Yeah, but you had your freedom, which is what you needed, because the moment Harvard says do this, and you're like no, and they're like we're going to pull the funding, you would have been now that I think about it, yeah, right. Wow, that's amazing. Wow,
so
that's wild.
yeah. So and that again, like boom, it was like holy moly, like I am now free and I'm fully funded. I can do what I want. The one but I was remember like I had been like working. So I actually one thing we didn't talk about, I started working when I was 11 years old, and I've never not worked ever in
What
my
was that first job at 11? Because you're not allowed to do much at 11.
um so interesting thing about immigrant communities is they don't really have the same cultural expectations about child labor.
Yeah. You don't need a blue card.
So, well, I mean, so I started working really when I was 9, like shoveling snow and doing things like that. 11, I started really like doing babysitting, and then well, my first real job was at 12. So there was a doctor, a Russian doctor in the neighborhood, and all of his like clients, all of his patients were Russian, mostly older people on Medicare, and he was looking for a receptionist. So at 12 years old, I became a receptionist in a medical office.
Did you have a mature voice at 12? Because I wouldn't have put a child's voice on a receptionist desk. We don't know. Now I need a recording of you at 12.
Um, Wait, but it gets better. So then
Okay.
one day, he's like, "Oh, my medical assistant is gone for the next 3 weeks. I need you to do the EKGs." So so he trained me to do EKGs on
What?
people when I was 12 years old. So I was, answering
That's
phones.
wild.
Oh, and I did Medicare billing as well. So he taught me all the codes for Medicare billing, and then I would do the Medicare billing. So I was doing Medicare billing, reception, and then EKGs.
Yeah, that would never happen in today's world, unfortunately, right? But
Again, like honestly, again, immigrant
wow.
communities have very different expectations and perceptions of child labor. And again, like these, I remember these older people, especially the older women coming in, and they're like a 70-year-old, Russian woman, and I'm like, okay, let me bring you into this room and like give you an EKG, and she's just like, okay. And,
Yeah, it's all good.
you have to like put the little,
Yeah,
probes like around, and I'd have to like move their breasts out of the way and like
that's
EKGs on there, and
wild.
I'm a 12-year-old girl.
That's
Like, so that was
amazing.
my first real job.
Do
I
you have
also still,
any pictures of that time when you worked there? Like,
oh, when I worked, no, I never took pictures
no,
when I worked there.
no.
Like, I mean, we had like real cameras and stuff with
Yeah, yeah,
film, right?
yeah.
I'm not going to
No,
waste
it's just
film on,
interesting.
yeah. No, so, and then when I was 18, I started a company. I started my first company with my dad. It was real estate, basically tax property assessments, because so property values went down. And so we're like, this is a great arbitrage opportunity. We can help
Yeah,
people get their
reduce
taxes
their taxes.
reassessed.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I did that first. I remember I'm trying to like make money for college and stuff like that, and I'm 18, and it was really easy to get customers, but it was really hard to get them to pay. So I learned
yeah.
like collections are really hard in that job. Okay, so anyway, so that
So
was a little
how long did it take you to get the PhD then, from the time that you started?
so funny thing about anthropology PhDs is they take a very long time. It took
Okay.
me 7 years, but I was the first person in my cohort to graduate. So 7 years
Wow.
seems like a very, very long time to people, but in anthropology is actually very short. The average, I think, is around 8 to 10 years, because you have to do your field work, and then field work, it has to be a minimum of a year in the field. But if you don't have it all like lined up and set up, you usually spend like 6 months just trying to get your field site to like actually manifest. So anyway, but yes, seven
But your
years.
field site was really different from anybody else's field site because,
Yes, it was,
yeah.
because I was working with Procter and Gamble and Leo Burnett to really understand what are the economic processes on the culture, like what are the cultural processes that lead to economic change, because the advertising industry and the companies that were bringing new products to the Russian market, they had a real interest in actually transitioning the economy. And so, what were the cultural practices that they had to put in place in order for that transition to finally happen, right? Because it didn't happen in the 1990s when you just did a whole bunch of macroeconomic stuff. It really, the economic transition happens on the ground when people make different decisions, which means that their mental models of the world start to shift. How does that happen? Advertising is one way, but then I studied a lot of other things in Russia as well that were happening.
I remember, I think this was the time when all that collapsed and all the news reports were how like underground capitalism is going on and they're selling the missiles and then they're selling this and people are selling that out of the back of their trucks. And I think there was someone thinking that capitalism was going to take over Russia. I mean, it never did. But there was like a couple of years where it felt like that. I kind of
Right.
remember seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the 1990s, there was a lot of like expectation that it would happen, capitalism would just happen. And then it didn't, right? 1998 proved that it doesn't just happen. So then in the 2000s, early 2000s, there were all these companies really doing a lot of work to get people to think like American consumers or like Western consumers, which did happen for a little while, but then Putin started all of his,
Yeah.
top down sort of political things. So only so much can happen with companies creating these things. If the state comes in and clamps it down, it
Clamps
kind of
it
goes,
down.
But for that little moment of time between 2000 and 2007, sort of Putin's first term, right, when he was just putting pieces in place and not really, kind of clamping down yet, um, a lot of companies were doing incredible work to create this sort of more capitalistic, mindset within people. And so I ended up writing a dissertation that was not a critique of capitalism, which in anthropology, if you write anything about capitalism, it has to be a critique of capitalism, like critique global capitalism, or whatever. And and I was just not interested in that. I'm like, why? You got, first of all, we have plenty of critiques of capitalism. And I taught Marx, at Berkeley. So I know how to critique capitalism. It's just not very interesting to me, right? Um, so my dissertation is really focused on what does it take to get new economic outcomes in a society? And what does it mean about the human future and about how we move forward? And anthropologists, some of them loved it, some of them loved my dissertation, but most of them absolutely hated it.
Wow.
And it's not like I said anything like incorrect. It
Was
was
it
just
the
not.
messaging? They didn't want that messaging coming out of their
It
university.
was so against their ideology and everything that they believed in and everything they thought that anthropology should espouse, that it was incredible. Like my first dissertation advisor dumped me after I started writing my dissertation
Wow.
because he wanted me to do a critique of global capitalism. He did not like that I like my approach, and he never critiqued anything that I wrote or said. He just said I can't work with you.
Wow. Wow. You're like the black sheep at UC Berkeley. Okay. Look, we got like 20 minutes left and I want to hear the rest of it, but I based on what we've learned already about you and your background, which is absolutely fascinating. I need like three more hours with you. But I want to transition for this last 20 minutes in how you start a company in AI. How does Wayfound get from concept to kind of where you are today?
The real answer again is that destiny brought me into the situation. I did not decide to start a company. I definitely never desired to be a CEO. In fact, my goal in life was to never be a CEO because frankly, it's kind of a shitty job. It's like it's not a fun job. You don't get paid that much more. In fact, I'm not getting paid any like way less than I did in my previous non-CEO jobs. I don't really need the status and I don't like nice things. So, I never wanted this job. However, there was a moment in time when ChatGPT came out and I knew, like a lot of us knew, this was going to change the world. And so I started thinking very hard about it and started researching it, started thinking about what will it take for humans to coexist with this new form of intelligence. And I started writing about it and I worked on a project to try to get other people to build something that would help to align and create good outcomes between humans and AI, especially in workplaces where I said, you know what, the first place we're really going to have to start knowing how to coexist with AI is going to be in our workplaces. So, what kind of workplace based technology can we create? How does it need to function? What does it need to do? How do we align human values with AI, what AI does, and AI behaviors? And I tried to get other people to build it, and it didn't work. Nobody wanted to do this, or they had other priorities. Actually, a lot of people liked the
What
idea.
year is this? You're talking
This
about
was
22,
2023. So all of
23.
2023, all
Okay.
of 2023, I worked with a small group of people. We actually met with Sam Altman. We met with Brad Smith of Microsoft. We met with Kevin Scott at Microsoft. We met with other founders of OpenAI. We met with, one of my colleagues that I was working with met with Dennis Hassabis. Like met with very high level people based on the writing that we were doing, and especially the writing I was doing.
Where was your writing getting published?
It wasn't published. It was just like white papers that we would send to them
Okay.
and then having conversations with them. And so the perspective was this is really interesting, but we're not going to do it. Somebody should do it, but we're not going to do it. And at the same time, I was advising a friend of mine, his startup, his incubator for startups, and he had a generative AI project going on with an engineering leader who I really loved and admired and respected. We worked together before at Pendo. And so he and I started like riffing and, talking. And then every time we would talk, he would change some of the code that he was writing. And then all of a sudden, the guy who's the head of the incubator studio was like, well, why don't you just like become the CEO of this thing? And I was like, oh God, I really do not want to be a CEO. So he's like, well, we have to start fundraising for this thing because we have a product now based on the work that you and Chad have been doing. So I went off and I wrote a pitch deck, came back, and it, turned out to be the first Wayfound pitch deck. And I'm like, here you go. And and he's like, this is great. We can just raise on this pitch deck. I'm like, fantastic. And he's like, well, but you have to pitch it. And I'm like, well, okay, do you want me to pitch it like interim CEO or something? And he's like, well, interim isn't going to work. So,
No, not going to work.
so I went to Chad and I was like, Chad, you want to be my co-founder and CTO? And he's like, no, I really like what I'm doing now. So the two of us, because we're both in our 50s, right? So we're both in our 50s. We are, we've had amazing tech careers already. If we wanted money, we definitely wouldn't be doing a startup, right? So like we saw no real desire. Neither one of us had a desire to found a startup. So I'm like, okay, I'll go. So I didn't even change my LinkedIn profile because I'm like, this probably isn't going to work. I'm like a solo non-tech female founder with this coming out of this incubator. Who's going to invest in me? And then I found, oh my God, the most amazing, wonderful investors who were deep in AI, exactly what I needed. They're the most incredible advisors. Like, I cannot speak more highly of the investors who invested in Wayfound. And all of a sudden, I'm like, Chad, we've got $3 million in the bank. You want to come? How do you want to be my, co-founder and CTO? He's like, You raised $3 million like that fast? And I was like, yep. And he was like, okay, let's do it.
That's nice.
That's how it happened. That's literal. That's the real story of how it happened. That is the absolutely like, and again, I the more that you align with your soul, and the more that you understand that ideas do not just come from your brain, and it's not about muscling through things. It's about understanding what the universe needs from you right now. And the more that you align with that, and the more I'll just speak for myself, the more that I align and try to align with what the universe wants and needs from me right now, the more incredible the outcomes are that I can achieve, and the happier, genuinely happier that I am. And so we have this incredible team of people we've both worked with before, people who wanted to join this endeavor to build a platform for AI agent management and for helping AI agents get aligned in companies and work together with humans who are not engineers. Like AIs are going to have to work with non-engineers too. So like the more that we can put the power and the tools and the capabilities for non-engineers to really interact with AI agents, the better. And so we're creating this platform. By the way, it's giving our customers amazing ROI and all of those metrics, but it's also deeply, deeply aligned with what we all care about.
So I know one of the roles of a CEO is to raise money, and maybe you had never done that before. But for me, the biggest role of a CEO is to be able to predict the future and stay 6 to 12 months ahead of, like, the CTO's got to manage, the VPs of engineering have to manage it. You have to manage the day to day. But if you don't have a CEO that knows what's happening in the next 6 to 12 months, you die. And you've already proven to me in our stories here that you have this uncanny ability to kind of see what's coming. I think you're going to be an amazing CEO over there. I'm
Thank you.
kind of curious, because it would help me. When you sit down and decide, I'm going to research this topic, like, what is your strategy around research, and how much time do you sort of give yourself to consume the information you need to make some sort of decision?
So, understanding that fundamentally my brain is wired as an ADD brain has really helped me a lot with this, because I can't have a to-do list. I can't like sit down. I can't like create like a plan for myself to do something and then do it, right? So one of the things I think about my brain, and I think this will resonate with other people who have the same types of brains, is we cannot control when or what will overtake us in our passion, because we just need constant stimulation, and whatever is the most stimulating is the thing that the brain focuses on. And I'm not really sure how it almost also feels like a calling from above about what I find stimulating. And then as long as that pursuit is stimulating, I keep pursuing it. And then when like the dopamine kind of wears off and the adrenaline wears off, I have to switch to something else. But what's interesting about the research is what I found is that researching something and understanding it is not a linear path. That this capability that I have to go really deep with something, and then my brain just refuses to keep pursuing it once it is not stimulating, it has to jump to something else. That jump is a new neural connection between the thing that I'm looking at and the next thing that my brain wants to be stimulated by. And that connection is a cross-disciplinary connection that leads to innovation.
Nice.
And so people like I've always like most of my life, I felt like the fact that I could not force myself to like sit down and focus on a thing based on a plan or based on a number of hours, like writing my dissertation, like all these people are like, just write 1 page a day or just write 2 pages. Like that's like a disaster for a brain like mine, right? Like I can't do that. What I do is I get inspired And then I sit down and I write 60 pages in like literally one sitting, and I will not get up because my brain is highly stimulated by whatever is happening at that moment, and I can't stop. I won't sleep, I won't eat, right? Until those 60 pages are done. Like no joke, like I'm not even joking. Like I'm not
Wow.
joking. Um, so that's how I research is I get an impulse. That impulse takes me to a place, and I continue to pursue the stimulation until I'm no longer stimulated and I jump to something else. That's the real answer.
So what do you aspire, or what are you excited about with um, Wayfound that even in the next 24 months, you'd love to see the platform and the product be able to do?
Well, again, so what Wayfound, the fundamental goal of Wayfound is to build our, mission statement is trust in intelligence. So to be the platform that allows humans to trust this new form of intelligence and allows the intelligence to be trusted because it is aligned with humanity. And in order to do that, what we're doing is we already have a platform where you can onboard your AI agents, no matter where they're built. You can onboard them onto Wayfound. You can give them guidelines of the things that you care about. Our AI manager, which is another agent, is then aligned with your company. All the things that you put in there that you care about, the manager is immediately trained on. And then we also have the manager then reading everything that every agent does. So you feel rest assured that you're never in the dark about what your AI agents are doing. We're building in RLHF techniques. So one of the things that we are seeing, which is incredibly aligned with my dissertation research actually, is that there's only so much that you can teach an intelligence before it's live and out in the world and interacting with other, humans or other AI agents. Where a lot of intelligence is created is in my dissertation research called practice theory, in the actual practice of what happens in the world. After an agent is deployed, it is actually learning much more, right, than you can do if you were just tweaking the weights in the model, like without actually having it interact, right? That feedback, it's called, RLHF, reinforcement learning through human feedback, but that feedback and democratizing that feedback from humans to AI agents in companies, right, is really, really important to have trusted interactions between humans and AIs in the future. The other thing that I want to say is that this is not just software technology like we have experienced in the past, and people don't get it because it's still based on, what we think of as computers and data centers and silicon-based, chips and things like that. But the difference between this technology and pre-programmed technology it's more different than the difference between a silicon brain and a carbon-based brain. Just to be clear, the difference between these brains and human brains is sand versus coal. That is the difference. They learn in the same ways, right? They make inferences in the same ways. They think in similar ways. The only difference in silicon versus carbon is that a lot of a difference. I think the people who think that that is a fundamental difference are making the same mistake that humans have made when we have thought that other humans or other living beings were not worth giving dignity to. And I think we need to, in order to build trust and intelligence, give dignity to our AI coworkers, right? And in order to do that, we need to learn to trust them and they need to learn to trust us.
So, I got time for a couple more questions. I love asking this one to business owners. What keeps you up at night?
I mean, nothing keeps me up at night. I sleep very, very well.
So there's nothing about Wayfound that keeps you up at night. Like there's nothing that's your you know,
Wait,
that you
wait.
see?
Well, no. I mean, so to be very, very honest, like this is the honest answer. The honest answer is as long as I am aligned with what the universe wants me to do, I sleep well. And as long as I know that I'm fulfilling my destiny, the actual circumstances and the outcomes in the material world do not matter. Whatever is happening is happening. As long as I am fulfilling my path in life and what my soul is called to do, that is good enough for me. And I mean, I am the other reason I sleep very well and nothing keeps me up at night is because I am absolutely, somehow I have a deep, deep knowledge and certainty that this company is going to be very successful as long as I keep following my soul.
I love it. Okay, we're completely out of time. I could talk to you easily for another hour and a half because I feel like I only got like half your story.
Oh,
But
you have no idea what you didn't get.
my God, I only got 30%. I only got 20% of this story. Oh man, what a bummer, man. So where are you located on the planet now? You're in California.
I'm in
Is
San
that where?
Francisco. Yeah.
Okay, Tatyana, if I ever end up in San Francisco again, I'm going to reach out so we can have a drink of your choice, and I got to hear at least another 30% of this story.
Sure. No
So
alcohol,
good.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I said. Drink of your choice. I
I
drink
do
Jameson.
like
I'm gonna need it.
I
But
do like homemade kombucha. No, you're not going to need it. So yeah, I also like do past life regressions and Reiki sessions for my friends. So
really,
yeah,
wow,
I've
that's
seen
good. I
several
don't.
of my past lives, which also is the reason I sleep very well. Because when you've seen your past lives, you're like, oh, this is just another one of those. It's going to be fine.
Oh, yeah, yeah. For okay, like I said, we can keep talking. And I really wish you the best of luck with Wayfound and AI and the agents. I was reading the website a little bit. I think it's a perfect time, and your timing is perfect too for these platforms being out there. And I think it's going to be a really interesting year for AI. And at the end of the year, we'll know a lot more
We
on what
will.
sticks and what doesn't. Because I think there's some stuff that isn't going to stick, and I think there's other stuff that will become part of the fabric of society when it's all said and done.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I just don't know what any of that is yet, but I know your ability to see the future. You know.
I actually, so if you want one more little thing, so I don't
Okay.
actually, I actually sense the future very well. There's a feeling inside me about what's coming. It's almost like the future is already here. It's somewhere in the collective unconscious, and somehow, and I don't know what it is, but I'm able to sense what's in the collective unconscious that's emerging.
Yeah,
It
amazing.
is true. Like I've always had that sense and I've always said that. And it feels crazy when you're younger, but now like I'm like, no, I really do have this sense for what's emerging in like the collective unconscious.
I think as you get older, you start to believe and understand in that stuff a little bit more, just because you've had 50 years of life and there are just things you can't explain any other
Exactly.
way. When you're young, it's harder to see these things, but
Hmm.
as you get older, you're like, yeah, I think there's something to it.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
We're going to put it in the show notes, Tatiana, but if anybody wanted to reach out to ask you a question or something based on the show, we'll put it in the show notes. But for those who are listening now, like, what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you?
So if you want to know more about Wayfound, Wayfound AI is our website, and you just click the little get a demo link, and that goes, I read those messages every week. And then LinkedIn, I'm Tatyana Mamut, T Mamut on LinkedIn. So
Yay. So now people can reach out. We'll get that in the show notes. So now, finally, this is the On Labs podcast signing off for Tatyana and Bill. We hope to see everybody again real soon.